I've become increasingly interested in common law and natural law. Now, I'm no expert. I've only sort of started paying attention to these subjects in the last few years. Now, I read and I talk to people more knowledgeable than I. But common law boils down to don't steal. And you can, so you don't steal someone's stuff. Don't steal someone's wife or husband. Don't attempt to take away, steal their rights, their freedoms. Don't steal. That's pretty much, it's natural law. And really, if you're not doing that, if you're not stealing, and you're not causing a fray, causing disturbance deliberately, or hurting anyone, or damaging property, you are free to go about your business. That's an ancient understanding of the inviolability, the untouchability of the individual who's not stealing. You've got to be left alone. And you're not really supposed to be taxed, surveilled, poked and prodded, psyops, nudge units, mandated. None of that. All of that is in breach of common law, and certainly in breach of natural law. And the establishments know it. They are operating unlawfully all the time in every realm now. They are knowingly behaving in a way that breaches the natural order of things. And, to get back to that question, and now the police are being used as a tool, the myrmidons of the state, being used for political ends. It's a tragedy, and I don't use that word mistakenly. I think one of the fundamental problems is that the people who have obtained power do not care about people. Worse than that, they regard the mass of the population with unbridled contempt. And that feeds into everything that we experience as a population now. They don't like us. And they certainly don't care about us. And the things that are being put in place by legislation are to our detriment, not by accident, but by design. Because it's being imposed upon people by people who don't like them. That's one of the basic awakenings that I think are necessary in order to come to terms with the nature of the world at the moment. There's no empathy. There's been some sort of distillation at the top, and any regard for the individual, any empathy with the circumstances of others, especially those who pose you no threat and are less well off and less everything. There's a contempt now, a distrust of, and a dislike of the populace, and the people at the top are only operating to increase their authority, control, and wealth. And anyone still labouring under the misapprehension that any of the institutions of state are benevolent or in any way committed to looking after you or making your life better or just leaving you alone, that's a misapprehension. And the way in which the corrupting of the police service is it's a notable example of that, but it's not alone. They don't like you. They actively don't like you, and they don't trust you, and they want to keep an eye on you 24 hours a day because they think you might go out and, improve your circumstances. They can't be having that.
It's interesting, the whole surveillance issues. I remember when they started to ramp up in Britain, it was quite a few years ago, and initially people who were kind of for them in one way, they would say, well, I don't do anything wrong, so it doesn't make any difference if they film me not doing anything wrong.
Does any look at the level of surveillance that's there now? You know, a density of CCTV, and I ask the question: does anyone feel safer than they did 20 years ago, or whatever? Everyone feels less safe. So all of that stuff was put in place allegedly to protect us, and nobody feels safer now. Here's the thing: government is we pay for it, right? There's no government money, not a cent. It's the money that people create from the sweat of their labour, right? That's the only wealth that ever exists. So any money that the government is spending is your money, or money that they're waiting for you to earn so they can take that. And because of that, because we pay for them and pay them, they are our servants, or they don't exist at all, right? Otherwise they're just squatting in your life. And because of that, it's been turned on its head. We should know everything about government, and they should know nothing about us. We are private individuals, they are public servants. We are profit, they are debit. And because of that, they have persuaded people that they ought to be in our business and in our faces. That is back to front and upside down. They should know nothing about us, not a thing. And we should know everything about them. And yet they're out there, you know, creating circumstance. You know, they're secretive all the time about what they're doing. A lot of people are very energised and agitated about the World Health Organization, the amendments to the international health regulations, that many people, myself included, see as a blatant theft of national sovereignty and people's rights. And there are organisations out there who have had the temerity to ask, to put in freedom of information requests, asking to know who from here, who from the UK is taking part in these negotiations, who is going to Geneva or whatever and taking part in these negotiations. And the government is saying, we're not telling you that. They won't even say what public servant that we pay for is out there taking part in conversations that the consequences of which could alter our circumstances to an unrecognisable and irredeemable place. And the government says, you're not entitled to know that. And that is an inversion of everything about the way things ought to be.
I'm sure it's the same in countries all over the world, but if you're reading the messages from government and the stuff they put out, they're always talking about an openness, how they're open and they want it to be open, and yet they do seem extremely secretive about everything, don't they?
Well, in the same way that the mafia, you know, Omerta, the Code of Silence and all of the rest of it, that's because the governments of the West are crime syndicates now. They're crime families in league with big corporate, big business and the banks. You know, Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum calls it stakeholder capitalism, but it's fascism. And these are criminal outfits that we're dealing with, who are operating criminally against the best interests of the vast majority of the population. Once you accept that, now you know where you stand. It feels too dangerous to move, to speak, to take a step. I feel increasingly as though I live, metaphorically speaking, in a minefield that's been deliberately set, and that we're all kind of in the minefield. And as long as you stand still with your mouth shut, you'll live to fight another day. But that if you dare to move, then anywhere you put your foot, it's liable to explode. And I think that's deliberate. You know, the online safety bill and all of the censorship and the silencing of dissent and all of the rest of it that's gone on, it works its evil magic on a mind, and eventually, you know, more and more people feel it's just safer just to, you know, that the only winning move is not to play, and the only winning word is the one not spoken. But I don't live in that world. But I think it's no accident that it feels so volatile all the time. And I think increasingly we are being made, or there are attempts being made to transform us into people unsure of anything and everything. There's a feeling that kind of uncertainty that preoccupies a person and makes a person lack the confidence to do or say very much. I don't think it's accidental that so many people feel like that. But what I will say is that to me it seems that what we're seeing now in the world this past couple of weeks, since the horror show that's begun to unfold in the Middle East began, this past couple of weeks, it's a taste, I would say, of what was always going to happen eventually. What had to happen thanks to the wickedness of despicable people in charge that have sought to seize control of our lives. And it's anybody's guess just how successful they've been so far. I would say that what we see happening around us are the consequences of years of malevolent, deliberately destructive psyops, psychological operations set in place to undo and then remake our civilization in the image of those who wish us only ill. And I'm well aware of how bleak and conspiratorial that sounds, but it's how I feel. I would say that this that I'm describing has been the work of the globalists. And that's a word you're not supposed to use. That's a word that you get into trouble for using, but damn the fear. Okay, so I'll say those psychopaths that are determined to enforce upon 8 billion people and counting a hellish vision. What's happening now is what happens when dangerous nonsense enforced upon populations in the name of so-called progressivism collides head on with the reality of the wider world that is not so afflicted, that is not living under the shadow of the progressives. It's what happens when populations that have been brainwashed to self-loathe, propagandised, even educated in schools and in universities to see themselves and their ancestors as shameful and deserving only of replacing and forgetting. Preached at by so-called faith leaders in their pulpits, and by politicians from behind their podiums, that ours is a civilization that has only done harm in the world. It's what happens when all of that destruction and undermining is finally and forcefully brought face to face with reality. And that reality is that much of the rest of the world is made of peoples and societies that are in no doubt about who they are. They're in no doubt about what they stand for. They're in no doubt about what a woman is. And more than anything else, they're in no doubt about what they believe. But years of cynical, intentionally destabilising propaganda, nudging, and in fact downright political policy have seen to it that we are a society riven and divided, atomised as never before, and set deliberately at one another's throats. I think the evidence is everywhere, and I think above all it's evidence of the hollow insincerity, the cynical manipulation of the many by the self-interested few. At the same time, I say that we do have to face some uncomfortable facts and truths. What is being done to us now has been visited upon others in the world for decades, if not for centuries. Always by the same few. We are suffering the wounds made by words, while those others in the wider world have suffered the wounds made of bombs and bullets. But it's all been wounding. And the globalist few, in pursuit of ever more wealth and power, they've seen to it that the rest of the world has suffered in the name of the West. The few want the oil and the rest, and in order to get their hands on it all, they have ruthlessly destabilised and or destroyed one population, one civilization after another. And always though, and this is crucial, it's civilians that suffer. Ordinary men, women and children, black, white and brown, and of any and every creed. It's civilians that suffer most. And always I say that all lives matter or no lives matter. That's the choice. All lives matter, or you accept that no lives matter. And what has been done to the rest of the world, well, it's coming our way. And always that's for the same reason. Because those obsessed with power care not a jot who they hurt or how many they hurt. And they'll hurt us now just as easily as they would hurt anybody else. And the world has suffered on account of the West. There's no denying it. But I stress and stress again that by the West in this context, I mean not the mass of the people, not you and me, just people just hoping to go about their lives. What I mean is the narrow stratum of evil creatures that have, by generations of policy, inflicted upon others untold suffering. It wasn't done by us, the people, but it was done in our name. And more to the point, it wasn't done by accident. Where we are now is where we were always supposed to be, at least from the point of view of the malevolent few that have sought, all but succeeded indeed, in taking control of the West and more recently the rest of the world. Just a few months ago, a person responding to the slogan Black Lives Matter with the humble suggestion that all lives matter would have been furiously shouted down as racist. And yet, what we have seen unfolding most recently in the benighted Middle East is surely shameful proof that when you get right down to it, only some lives matter. Now, I don't have the wisdom to make sense of what's going on, far less to come up with answers. But I will say that I can, will and do only condemn any and all wickedness that sees to the deliberate ending of civilian life, the lives of children especially. And I look at the certainty of some, the determination of so many to respond to murders of the ugliest sort with yet more murder of yet more people who are only powerless and also helpless. And all I can say is I know that I'll never understand such action. How can they look at themselves in the eye in the shadow of so much blatant hypocrisy? And here's the thing, where do we go from here? While once we were nations, peoples kept apart from one another by distance or by borders, you might say the gang's all here now. Everyone's everywhere, largely through no fault of their own. Millions have been on the move away from some or other hellhole, not of their own creation. And I say, are we to be goaded finally into holy war or into World War III? Is that inevitable? Is that where we're going? Are we to be goaded into be giving into only the worst version of ourselves? I would say, if there are to be solutions now, they must be solutions for all, for everyone. Because I don't think it's ever been truer to say that for good or ill, from this point onward, we are all in it together.